$2 billion. That's how much the World Bank now estimates the Ebola outbreak in Africa will cost by next year. The UN chief says 20 times more aid may be needed. Treating just one person in the U.S. is reportedly costing $500,000. Decontaminating one apartment, $130,000. With all these costs spiraling, Betsy McCaughey is worrying. Betsy, welcome to the program.
Thank you. And I'm worried about the human and the financial costs of continuing to allow unrestricted commercial air traffic from West Africa directly into the United States.
You want a travel ban?
Yes. Whatever money the United States spends helping to contain this epidemic should be spent on the continent of Africa, containing the disease in Africa and preparing the nations that are in, the African nations that are in Ebola's future path, because the hospitals in the United States, Stuart, are not prepared to contain Ebola. 75,000 patients in America die in these hospitals each year from ordinary infections spreading in the hospitals because of the lack of rigor.
But you've got to tell me about the costs here.
Yes.
Is it correct to say that the hospital cost for Mr. Thomas Duncan was $500,000, $500,000?
That's right.
That's
no
accurate?
one has discussed how that's going to be paid for.
Okay.
Right.
What about the cleanup of the apartment? I spoke to the cleanup crew chief. He put it at $130,000 to clean up one apartment.
Well, let's discuss also the preparations that are being undergone now in cities all across this country, especially in the 5 airport hubs, such as Chicago and New York, to prepare hospitals, to prepare transportation workers, to prepare EMS, first responders. Hundreds of millions of dollars preparing them in case there's an Ebola case here in the United States again, when in fact that money could be much more wisely spent overseas.
Now,
but in addition...
wait a second. Do you think that the cost of treating each Ebola patient or suspect is such that we simply cannot afford it and must therefore impose a travel ban? Is that the argument here?
No, the argument, the costs are unaffordable, but the bigger argument is the human costs. Why should a nurse going to work at a hospital in New York or Chicago face the ultimatum of perfectly putting on all of this containment gear or death?
What about
that is what is happening.
The nurse in Madrid.
Yes.
She treated 2 Ebola patients.
She had full protective gear.
Right.
But she inadvertently, we're told, touched her face with her gloved hand in the process of removing her gear. Well, that could happen to any nurse or doctor in the United States. We know from the record of infections in the United States that infection control is not practiced perfectly and rigorously in the United States, as Thomas Frieden, the CDC head, says it should be to contain Ebola. And without that rigor, healthcare workers will die. 216 have died in Africa already, including some of the most highly trained epidemiologists on that continent. They were not taking care of their patients and
travel ban. Case closed, travel ban. That's it?
Right.
Betsy McCaughey.